Hi, everybody. Excited to be here. So I just wanted to first say hi. I wish I could be there in person, but the flu got me this year. So I am recovering in my sweatpants in California, but I hope you guys are having an amazing time out in New Orleans. I head design infrastructure at DoorDash, but if you asked any of the people on my team, really my real job title is I'm the queen of puns and memes there. They will laugh if you say anything about this, but if you're not familiar, DoorDash is the number one food delivery company in the United States, but we also do lots of different things like deliver retail and groceries, etc. But I also would put it in the words of Christopher from The Sopranos, exactly what DoorDash does. I lead an amazing group of about 25 designers and design technologists, design engineers, as Jeremy put it. And we support 65 product designers and 350 UI and front end focused engineers at DoorDash. We build all the foundations that support the folks that order things on our consumer product, the folks that do deliveries with as dashers, and the folks that run their businesses as merchants. And that foundation is called the Prism Design System. That's the core of what we provide on my team. And in that work, we provide theming for multiple brands. We're not just DoorDash, we're also brands like Caviar and Wolt. We build components across native platforms, so iOS, Android, and web. And we also do all the amazing design systems work around guidelines and practices and patterns. And within this organization, we're a group of design systems engineers and designers. So I manage the engineers on the team as well. We're accessibility focused engineers and designers, and we also are starting new practices like prototyping. But that's just where we are today. And really what I want to focus on is, kind of my story and what I've seen along my journey here at DoorDash. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've learned along the way. So as Jeremy mentioned, I joined as the first designer and first front-end engineer way back in 2015, about 7.5 years ago, when DoorDash was a tiny, tiny startup. I've had an opportunity to grow design systems as a practice, as both an engineer and designer doing the work myself, and then managing a very small team from about 2017 to 2021. And then also now figuring out how to learn to lead design systems at scale with a group of about 25 people. And over these last 7.5 years, there's kind of three important aspects of design systems work, but more importantly, in building a function that I've learned over these few years. And I want to talk about that. So when you're a startup and you're still trying to figure out how is design systems important? How does it find its place as a part of the practice of building what you're building at your startup? How do you sell that importance? When you think about the middle stage of trying to grow your practice and you don't have a lot of resources, how do you handle the scarcity of what you have and what you're trying to achieve? And then at scale, how do you solve for those challenges of serving so many different teams and products? And the way that I've seen that growth over my time at DoorDash kind of manifests in these lessons. And so figuring out in that startup phase, how do you find and sell that need? When you're growing, how do you build just enough to find success and really meet the business where it is? And then at scale, how do you build with sustainability and build a function that has that sustainability and maturity? So the first part of my story is, as a startup, how do you find the need? And the question that I kind of asked myself in this time is, how do you align what the company needs and what you uniquely can do? So in my case, someone that was a design engineer, and make it something that is worth selling to leadership that can help you start that practice, for instance, design systems that you're really excited about. And so we'll start at the beginning. In 2015, I joined as the first designer and first front-end engineer at DoorDash. And so for scale, we were about 35 people. There are 8 other engineers, but most of them were full stack kind of folks and not folks that really, knew front end well. And it was a really interesting time to be there. We were still trying to figure out what we wanted to be as a company. We could fit all of the people at DoorDash in one little picture in a park. And there was a lot that we were still figuring out. And as someone that is speaking at a design systems conference and talking about that, you kind of imagine, okay, how did I get the design system off the ground at this point? Well, we didn't really need design systems yet. And I think that was something that was, an aspect of my story and figuring out, okay, how do I get this thing that I care about and love, which is the intersection of design and engineering, into a place where it can be a practice that we do in our company. But what we did need at the time was just setting up the structure for how do we think about building for UI and interfaces. One of the things that I could do really quickly was both provide perspective in terms of how we could build and the kind of ways that I can shape the front end engineering practice for all the engineers that didn't really know how to think about front end because they're full stack and solving all sorts of other problems. I could also put the infrastructure in place, getting people to work in a component driven mindset by putting together the infrastructure for how we built web engineering and have React as kind of the core of our practice. And so for a long time, that was kind of how I thought about bringing this design and engineering intersection to my work. I was a designer by the day, I was an engineer at night, and it was something that I really loved and enjoyed doing. But fast forward to 2017, and as you can imagine, trying to do that kind of work as 2 separate things was not very sustainable. And so I was really trying to figure out how do I take that next step to do something that was sustainable, but also help me find something that the company needed. And so one of the ways I thought about this was, there's this framework for how you think about the thing that you enjoy doing, the thing you can be paid for, and what you're good at, that also intersects with what your environment needs, and in my case, what DoorDash needed. And it's called Ikigai. It's this Japanese concept. And as I was thinking about this intersection, one of the things that I found was a useful way for me to kind of think through this process was writing my own job description. I think, as a startup, when you're thinking about, putting your practice out there and trying to get that sort of buy-in from leadership, being able to articulate what is the thing that you're trying to do in specific ways is useful. And as I was thinking about writing this job description of what I wanted, I had to think about, okay, what are the ways that I can sell this to leadership and to the company? And there's lots of different problems and different ways I could approach this, but the way that I found the most leverage and found the most opportunity to make design engineering something that the company wanted and needed was in knowing that I could improve the quality of engineering. And so for me, finding myself in a place where I could do the thing that I wanted and the thing that I was good at in service to improving the quality of engineering in a way that was measurable and demonstrable to the company, that was how I made the argument for getting design engineering and design systems in turn onto our radar. And so being able to see myself become a design technologist in 2017, get buy-in from my manager, the head of design, and like the CEO of the company was something that was really exciting. And I think the lesson that I kind of got from this period of time was, as a startup, there will be a million different things that need to be done. But as someone that's excited about design systems or design engineering, it's your job to really find what matters in that and be able to sell that as kind of a unique value. And so from here, we started to really find our rhythm and actually start making design systems a practice at DoorDash. And this kind of goes to the next part of my story. We're growing a lot, and we need to figure out how to make this practice of design systems work. And so this is the question that I asked myself throughout this time. How do you figure out what to focus on when you're one person at a startup or you're just a few people at a startup to make this function of design systems actually work? And so the thing that I latched on too quickly was, okay, the promise of what I was here for was to help up level engineering quality. And someone that knew the web well, I was going to go and make that surface really great and help make everyone that was contributing to web super successful. And I took 3 months, time boxed myself to be able to say, hey, what is the most that I can do now to get to that promise that I sold? And I was able to get the design system off the ground really quickly so that we could actually see those returns, see that sort of success in what design systems was. And very quickly, more challenges came up. In early 2018, DoorDash rebrand for the very first time. And so what that meant was there was an opportunity for us and technically me as a design systems practitioner to be able to say, hey, design systems can help us get to a place where we can do this rebrand and do it thoughtfully. And the challenge that we immediately found was we're a mobile-first company. DoorDash is one that really relies on iOS and Android. And so we needed to get our design system outside of just the web. And so I learned how to make iOS and Android happen. I knew a little bit of iOS, didn't know anything about Android, but what I knew was for the success of this function, I needed to be able to demonstrate that this was something that we could change and affect, not just on the web, but also on these other platforms. And we did a great job of actually making that success happen. And so, for us, being able to choose one specific problem, work quickly to solve it, and then demonstrate that success, it enabled new doors for us, like hiring. And in late 2018, I was able to bring on my first sort of partner on the team, Matt Liu, who's an amazing design system designer. And we quickly continued working to figure out what is the next big thing. And so for us, in early 2019, we knew that we had grown our initial systems very quickly, and we needed more rigor in the foundations. And so what we looked for was, what are the problems that we're seeing now? And very quickly, we knew that with that period of time coinciding with our design org growing by quite a lot, we were seeing problems with how people were thinking about color and how to make decisions with it. And so that was another way that we understood, okay, this is the area that we're going to take on. And so we used that signal as a way to say, let's focus on our foundations. Let's figure out how to make a sustainable color system that makes it really easy to both reason about color and also do things like make sure that accessibility is easy to work with through like this new color system that we're building. And so with that rigor in place, we knew that, okay, we have these foundations that we spun up quickly in the beginning of 2019. And now we can actually take another area of design systems that we could be a value add on as accessibility. We could make accessibility something that is more well considered in our organization and through the design system. And so we took that as the next big challenge. And by the end of 2019, one of the things that was exciting for us as a company was we were growing and we were adding a new sort of service called Caviar, which we acquired in the later part of that year. And what this meant for us was, we had spent a lot of time in 2019 trying to figure out how to get our foundations in a good place. And we now needed to figure out how to build more on top of that to actually make DoorDash and our design system Prism a multi-brand sort of system. And so, as a small group of about 5 folks in early 2020, we really focused on building this new infrastructure for us to be able to manage themes, many themes, and to have it be something that from Figma to theme definitions to code generation, we could control very easily. And we had a business need that was looming in front of us. We wanted to make DoorDash and Caviar work off one design system in the span of a quarter and a half. And so in the work that we did in the first part of 2020, getting our theming and our foundations in place, we were able to take DoorDash as a product and make it something that through our design system could allow Caviar to be built on top of what we had as a system and as a product. And more importantly, we proved that the design system and theming was a tool for us to have efficient brand acquisition and extension. And it gave the business and leadership confidence that, hey, like we can use this as a tool to do this in the future. And at the same time, too, we were also thinking about, okay, with this foundation in place, how do we leverage this to do more exciting work that supports not just the folks buying things on DoorDash, but the folks doing deliveries? And so we worked to use our system to enable dark mode for our Dash app at that same time. And we built on that foundation, that success, to do something that really only we could do. And so in late 2020, we were getting prepared for an IPO, and we were we were really excited as a company, but as a group, we were still really small, and we were continuing to support a lot of teams with the things that we were building. We were really small. We were focused really deeply on execution, figuring out what is the most impactful thing that we can do really efficiently. And I think some of the ways that we saw the lessons from this time as a new function, as a design system trying to support a lot, is that in hypergrowth and when we had limited resources, being really rigorous about what you build and figuring out what is the shortest path to impact was something that was really important and critical for us. And we needed to do that to meet the business need because, we couldn't just build what we wanted to, but we needed to build what was most impactful and what we wanted as an intersection. And so I think this time was, a pivot point. We were getting to a place now where we're post-IPO and we're starting to reach a need to scale and to find sustainability in that scale. And I think for us, the defining question of this time was, okay, we found the success. How do we start finding maturity and sustainability for what this practice is for the long term? And for us, the way that we've been thinking about it in this time is thinking about how do we have sustainable and structured growth? How do we think about the process and the focus of our team to ensure that we're being thoughtful and efficient? And then how do we give ourselves the infrastructure for navigating this new level of scale that we, as both an organization, but also as a company, are trying to navigate? And so I'll start first with sustainable and structured growth. I think one of the things that is important for me to say in this is that we're in a really lucky position. I know in a time when so many others are impacted in this economic climate, we're in a good place where the business is healthy. We're so lucky to grow, and we're trying to do this in our best and most thoughtful way. And so I want to say that before getting into how we've done that. So in 2020, we were a really small and scrappy group. But in 2022, we're a much bigger organization, multiple teams, 25-ish people. And one of the ways that we thought about what does sustainable scale and how to sell that, like scaling, look like, is through the lens of thinking about what we're trying to achieve as an organization in the support that we're trying to give to our designers and engineers building all of our products at DoorDash. And so a tool that has been really useful is talking about ratios. So, for us, the way we think about this is we want to be very hands-on in helping to support our designers and engineers. We do a lot of pairing, a lot of support practices that are meant to be very close to how people are trying to use the design system and the things that we produce from it. And so figuring out the right ratio for us versus like the orgs that we're supporting is something really important. And we talked about thinking through going from very high scale, which, in certain, or very high ratios, which in certain ways can be useful, to things that are a little more sustainable for us from 2020 to now. And at the same time, we also want to think about, making sure that our teams are well staffed and that the sort of structure that we put in place for our org is well considered. And so breaking down into different teams with engineering and design, accessibility and prototyping being all separate areas has been really important, because one of the things that we know as we're getting sustainable is we don't want one person being the sole person that understands how any of these complex systems work. And so we want to make sure that we have that level of support from other teammates and that ability to be able to keep growing to support what we're doing be really key to our org design. And at the same time, too, we think a lot about how to shape our team specifically to support the org that we're supporting. So we think about this distinction of a global design system and the sort of decisions that live across all the different products at DoorDash, and then our local partners and how they can help individual teams make decisions that are reflective of what they're trying to do. And so we have a structure where global systems people are really thinking about like Prism as a whole, and local partners are the conduits for how we get information, make decisions about the things that are coming from local systems that use Prism. And at the same time, one of the things too that we think about is we want to make sure that for sustainability and scale, we want to have the right level of management support for the team. We know that it is something that is a little bit of a privilege. We have a lot of teams that we know and we've worked with in the past that don't have a lot of design system practitioners. But for us, we want to make design systems a practice that this is the best place to work for design systems, and having that level of management support and career support is something that's important to us. And at the same time, building that leadership bench of the team. We're always going to be changing. I'm not going to be at DoorDash forever, and I want to be able to make sure that we have the right leaders and the right people in place to have that future ahead of us. And at the same time, we don't just want to think about growing our org, but we want to think about the processes and practices and the ability to focus that help us be more sustainable and more efficient at what we do. And so over the last year, a lot of the things that we've been thinking about are, okay, what are the things that can help us as we're growing the team, as we're supporting more people, be more thoughtful about how we deploy our time and deploy our efforts. And so some of the things we think about are, okay, we have many teams now in our org, and we're supporting many more product teams. How do we make sure that we're building our plans and the ways that we're thinking about what we aim to do in a very thoughtful and rigorous way? And so thinking about capacity planning, thinking about very structured sprint planning, as well as longer planning cycles, versus being more fluid and more scrappy. We're thinking about how to get that next level of maturity so that our team has the ability to do big things, but also do it in a way that is thoughtful and they're not going to run into burnout. We're also thinking a lot about, okay, how do we make sure that the quality of the things that we're doing are consistent? So making sure that we have the right design reviews and chip reviews, component criteria and checklists in place. Those are all really key to making sure that we're able to move in a consistent way, because we're trying to give that consistency to our end users and to our the people that we're supporting through the design system, but we also have to live up to that in our own quality. And then two, also thinking about how do we elevate the way that we're supporting our stakeholders. So, we've had office hours forever, but figuring out how to do that in a way that is more clear, gives better feedback to people. Those are the kind of things that we think about. Also, in terms of how we think about scale. So we have about 500 people in a Slack channel giving us questions every day about how to use a particular part of the design system. And we need to figure out how to be efficient with that. And so building tooling like support bot for those kind of questions is something we've invested in, as well as also thinking about the kind of rotations for the people on our team to make sure that they're not taking on too much. They have less context switching and churn when trying to support others, so they can have more focus in what they're doing when they aren't on the support rotation. And then finally, one of the things we want to think about is what is the kind of ideas and infrastructure for how we navigate the scale that we're at now. The biggest thing that we are thinking about for the future is this machinery, like it will help us influence and navigate the scale. And some of the ideas that come from that are on these different areas. So one of the areas that we're investing in now is, okay, how do we give ourselves the tools to make the right decisions on what we work on in terms of adoption? How do we know what we're doing and how does it make a direct impact in the product? How do we make sure that the products themselves are also living up to the level of quality and accountability that they need? And so our team is uniquely positioned to be able to help make that happen. We also think about things like feature flags and versioning for themes. As we grow as an organization, design systems have to be more nimble, and we have to be able to control when we release things or when we version new parts of our themes. And so being able to ensure that we're able to control that in a more specific way is something we think a lot about. And then finally, we think about that idea of local systems that I mentioned earlier, which we're deeply inspired by companies like Spotify, having done this in the past, as ways of ensuring that we're making decisions that are specific to the different areas of our product, and that alongside that, we also have the right tools in the system itself for the extensibility and customization that are needed to support those local systems. And so, these ideals, while not entirely our own, are things that we really look to guide us and help us as we, look to the future and scale even more. So, taking a breath before we recap. So for me, going through this, experience from startup to where we are now at scale post IPO, there's these lessons that I think I found for myself in building this function and in building a design system that I think you all can also take in your own practices. As a startup, the biggest challenge is finding the biggest problems and proving that systems is something that is important and something that should be invested in. And I think there's a lot of ways to narrow in and find that thing. When you're growing and when you have that team and that practice in place, figuring out how you can be rigorous about what challenges you take on and being able to align that with the business, those are the things that I think help you find success when you're growing your org. And then when you're at the scale that we are now, and you're trying to figure out how do you keep growing and maturing, figuring out the right structure and the sort of practices that give you stability to really arm yourself to succeed at scale, that's the biggest key. And so those are the ways that I found in my journey are important in growing a design systems practice. And I hope that helps you too. So Thank you. That's my talk. Excited to get to the Q&A.
Hello, Kathryn. Thank you so much for that amazing talk. I have a bajillion questions, but I will try to stay on time. I do want to definitely say that it is amazing to see the way that you have set up your slides, the way that you sort of turned it into an infographic. So it really helped to follow along with the scaling that you're doing. Um, that's a lot of change and growth, and I would love to hear about how um, you made your decisions on where to grow your team, because I thought that was pretty unique to see that breakdown of what areas the team is focused on.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is worth really understanding is every situation is different. For us at DoorDash, one of the things that was important for me as I was thinking about growing the organization was my focus very early on, as I mentioned, was scaling the quality of engineering. And so a lot of the things that we were doing were more focused on the engineering side of design systems in the practice. But as we started to change and as we started to grow the organization, design quickly was growing faster in that period of time after I started the design system. And so I realized that for me, trying to figure out how to make an impact on the design side while I could also make an impact on the engineering side, I needed more support. And so getting a designer on the team to really balance out my focus and the need that was propping up on the design side, that was the way that I kind of thought about making those decisions. And so being able to really understand what your community or what your company needs, and being able to react to that, versus like having a very structured plan for how you're growing, that is not considerate of where your actual needs are. That was a lesson for myself. I had to make sure that I was being specific about why I was making decisions in the context of DoorDash.
It's really interesting to hear you say that, because thinking about Amy's talk this morning too, it's about looking where we're currently at and what our actual needs are, and not necessarily what um, the dogmatic standard would be. And there's a cat jumping onto my keyboard who has come in to say hi and has been to past clarity. So you may see a cat butt go by. So from there, I imagine that there are a lot of teams still working to scale at the level that you have. What would you maybe how would you advise those teams on what they should consider as they are starting this work?
Yeah, I think the thing that I would say is there is a lot of opportunity to do interesting and novel design systems work at a startup because you are doing something fresh. And really, like some of the challenges that come with design systems at larger companies is trying to tame the chaos in a lot of ways. But for someone that is starting at a startup, you have an opportunity to set the culture, set the way of working that your engineering design partners can then go from. And so I think being able to think about what is the um, what is the smallest thing that I can do as one person trying to start design systems practice, to really like set that culture and that future. Those are the things that I think about, and sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean creating a design system as we know it with the components and the UI kits that are coming from that. Sometimes it means providing a direction like that documentation that I mentioned at the very beginning of, okay, this is just how we should think about it. And this is the sort of framework for you as like a engineer in the startup, that you should be able to use to figure out how to build great UI. So I think it's being creative and thoughtful about what is the impact that you can make when it's really only you in the room.
Yeah, and there's a lot of chat going on right now in the virtual chat room about cat that is jumping over everything. No, they're not talking about the cat jumping over everything. They are talking about being the only person in the room, which I am not, because I have that cat. So I think that that is really relevant to where a lot of people are at right now. I really loved when you spoke about hyper growth and limited resources, um, and being rigorous about what to build and meeting the business needs. Is there anything that you can share about how to prioritize what what actually gets built when resources are low?
Yeah, the way that, I've found that is useful in thinking about prioritization is that there's both the kind of initiatives that come bottoms up. So you have the needs of the people that are out building your UI day to day, the people that are doing the design work. And so you have to be able to be a part of that community and understand what are the pain points that they have. And so in the early days when we were a very small team, and I wasn't just managing, but also like executing on the work. It was really important for me to be in those spaces and to know what are the things that people need. The folks in the room actually building, but also at the same time, like being able to marry that understanding with the needs of the business at the same time, by being really close to my product partners, being really close to design leadership, um, knowing and picking their brains every day on what are the things that are, um, parts of where we're going in the near future in our roadmaps and what's important to the business. Being able to have your role be a conduit for those two perspectives. That's like a way that I've found, especially in hyper growth, to be successful. Because you can't just do one or the other. You have to kind of meet them in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, continuing to see this theme of context and what that means for everything that we're working on and really addressing that first. In a similar vein, I found it really interesting that the process of writing your own role for that role that doesn't exist yet. Is there anything that you maybe learned along the way in that process?
I think one of the things that was interesting was, um, I think there is well, one thing that people that know you, that are your manager, that work with you, can see is the things that really get you excited, that get you in a place where you um, are able to do more than if you are doing something that you're not as interested in. They can see that level of energy, that level of focus that comes from you when you do that. And so if you're able to find the thing that like gets you to a place where you're better at what you do because you're more focused, or that you have a perspective on what your role should be, and other people have seen what that focus looks like in practice when you're going about and doing that. I think people can be really supportive, and so I think thinking about how do you um, prototype and test that the role that you have for yourself and see how that gives you the energy to be successful. That's something that I think is a useful way of kind of defining more nebulous roles, especially when you're early on at a startup.
It's really fascinating because I just had this aha moment while you were speaking to think about that type of job posting as a prototype. We're so used to, I think some similar things happen between job postings and maybe design system work, that we are thinking of this end goal and not necessarily let's start here, let's show the work early, let's adapt from there. And so I think that is extremely fascinating. And gosh, there's so many things I want to dig in with your talk, and I just want to thank you so much for all that you've shared. I think we can all learn so much from your slides, even how you included concepts like ikigai into forming the need of, again, going back to that engineering piece. Um, is there anything else that you feel is really important for our audience to know?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is really useful to know is that um, your situation is always going to be unique. And I think for me, like being able to think about, DoorDash at the different periods of time that I talked through and what it needed, and the culture, the sort of people of DoorDash, um, that all informed the decisions that I was making. But what you have, in your tool belt is, the space that you're in, the
Mm-hmm.
people that you're working with, and you can figure out the ways to help frame design systems in, a way that will land with them. And so I think just being able to think from first principles, that's one of the ways that DoorDash has kind of instilled in me. It's one of our cultural values. Being able to think about your specific situation, think about how to make design systems work there, you're always going to have more opportunity to make an impact if you think about it in that way. So that's the thing I would leave folks with.
That's really awesome. I know we're coming up on time. What are the best ways for folks to find work that you have shared online or find social accounts? What would be the best?
Probably the best way is going on Twitter. I will share my Twitter handle on the Clarity Slack, but I am there, and I'm also on the Design Systems Slack community. So please reach out to me. Always interesting questions, and also I have to mention we're hiring across many different roles. So feel free to reach out.
That is great to hear. We'll find your handle in the chat. We'll find those links and get them posted. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for doing this live. And I know you haven't been feeling well, so I hope that you get some rest. And thank you again. This was awesome.
Awesome. Thank you all.